So right now, well, at 10:30, so it's already started. Well, it's already been going on for an hour potentially. We are going to see over the next 2 days a very, very interesting, I think, legal battle, and I think is not going to have repercussions for the COVID inquiry, but is certainly going to have a ripple effect down inquiries for well, possibly forever. So, for those of you who may not know all this, let's refill you in on this. So, when the COVID inquiry first started, they asked for WhatsApp messages. They said, we know ministers have been discussing policy. We know they've been discussing all this in WhatsApp. So we want to see those messages because that is going to be relevant. And that's the key question, relevant, because it's all about relevancy. Of those messages. We want to see that. And of course, number 10 has said, well, first of all, we don't think it's acceptable to give you these WhatsApp messages. And then, of course, this led to the whole person leading the inquiry said, I'll be the one to decide whether or not it's acceptable for the inquiry to look at those messages. And this led to a situation on a bit of a standoff, which potentially was also going to go to the High Court. However, number 10 then relented. I think certainly they had got some sort of legal advice to say, hey, you can't really withhold this information from the inquiry. But this is what they proceeded to do next. They instead decided that they were going to censor certain parts of this of these WhatsApp messages, and the leader of the inquiry then went, "Well, hold on a second. If I am really to determine whether or not these messages are going to be relevant to the inquiry, I need to see them all. I need to see them completely uncensored and unredacted so that then I can decide whether or not this evidence that you are providing us is going to be relevant to the rest of the inquiry." And I think, to be honest, the inquiry chair might be in the right. Now, I said before, I'm no legal expert when it comes to these types of things, but in terms of openness and transparency, I think it would be good if number 10, certainly as Rishi Sunak has claimed that he wants to restore trust in people's politics, and we've already had, to be honest, quite a good public inquiry with the whole Partygate inquiry and, of course, the Privilege Committee inquiry into Boris Johnson. So, to be honest, at the moment, we're sort of 2 for 2, and we might even go 3 for 3 at this point, depending on the COVID inquiry. But of course, I've said before, this is going to be a very, very long inquiry. But of course, in fact, it's going to take 2 years roughly to do the whole COVID inquiry. But the leader of the inquiry has said that periodically they are going to sort of drop in key points before they release the whole thing and said, this is our sort of whole findings, this is how we think. And the first part, of course, what they are trying to cover at the moment is preparedness. How prepared was the UK? And they've gone really thorough into this to the point that they brought in David Cameron and George Osborne into this, saying, hey, we want to ask you, did your program of austerity, did the stuff that you do affect eventually what happened in 2020? So already this inquiry, I think, is going a lot further than a lot of people initially really suspected, but also what the campaign groups, particularly the group of most of the group of people who lost relatives during the pandemic, have specifically asked her for that. At least the judge leading this inquiry. So it has done so. So already, I think this inquiry is asking the right questions, but the fact that already the government has forked over all these WhatsApp messages, even though that some of them have been redacted, is a lot of WhatsApp messages to go through. And it's going to be a lot of information to sift through. let's put it that way. And I would rather the COVID inquiry deliver its findings in a timely manner, but equally, I also want them to be able to access the full information of the full, WhatsApp messages. So I do want them to see that at the same time. But equally, as a lot of experts have said, they have dumped just so much information that parts of this could be delayed and maybe done so on purpose, because obviously we know we've got a general election coming up. We've had the live testimony so far of, like I say, David Cameron, George Osborne, which politically did not go down well for the Conservatives. But also you've had Matt Hancock give evidence recently where he's openly admitted that, yeah, we had to do all this Brexit planning at the same time, so we couldn't give over capacity to help, prepare for the pandemic, or which we knew was coming. And if you remember going back to 2020 or at least 2019, a lot of us were saying at that time, hey, should we maybe delay Brexit just to make sure that this pandemic that we are seeing seems to be gathering at its speed, doesn't interfere, because we already know Brexit's going to be a big sort of challenge for the UK. Even the EU said that as well. They said, hey, this whole pandemic thing that seems to be coming seems as if it's going to be pretty serious. Are you guys sure you don't want to delay it so that, we can, deal with that first, then we'll deal with Brexit? But of course, the government under Boris Johnson was pretty much gung-ho, let's go for it. Now, of course, it's going to be very interesting when we finally get, of course, Boris Johnson's view on this. And I'll be very interested to see what the inquiry has to ask about that. But of course, back to the issue of these WhatsApp messages, because I think this is the key thing. And we'll find out probably on Monday what the High Court has to say in regards to these WhatsApp messages. But the excuse, well, I say the excuse, but the argument number 10, of course, is using to do this is they're saying, look, ministers don't just talk about COVID, which she said, okay, fine, that's not going to be relevant. But they've also said that there are ministers in there making comments about the COVID policy. And their excuse for redacting some of this stuff is that, hey, if this gets published and sort of used, then this might affect ministers' confidence to be able to talk about policy privately. Now, I'm very much of the opinion that, look, if you're in power and you're talking about policy, which is going to have an outcome, because that's what sort of policy does, I think that is relevant. I really do think, in my personal opinion, that is relevant, and that the inquiry should be allowed to look at that. And I think that one of the things a lot of people are saying is that those conversations that have been censored have come from a lot of MPs, because we knew there were a lot of crazy right-wing MPs trying to influence the government at that time not to go into lockdown, not to bring in any of this COVID stuff like that. And there are potentialities. I think there is a potentiality or a possibility, shall we say, maybe Rishi Sunak maybe said something that he's not going to like, shall I say, getting out. We'll see. Like you say, we'll see. This will all, I'm sure, come out sooner or later. But to be honest, if Boris Johnson or even Dominic Cummings were sitting on WhatsApp messages that will, shall we say, be highly embarrassing to Rishi Sunak, they'd have released them already. So we'll see. But this is, like I say, an important case, and we'll see what happens, because I think this is going to have repercussions for future inquiries going down the line. So it is, I think, highly important to see what happens in this case, and of course, the ruling that the High Court makes around this. So, as always, Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to click on the like and share button on your way out. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the One Foundation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There is the YouTube thank you button. And of course, the Pony Club down below, you can join as well, which does help support the channel. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.